"I don't have a father anymore," my daughter said, her voice steady and cold, like she had practiced the line. I heard the words before I even understood they were meant for me. I was standing behind the half-closed door of the community hall, holding a small bag of groceries I had planned to give her. She spoke to a woman I didn't know, and the sentence hit me with such force that my knees almost buckled. I had spent 40 years raising her, and she ended it without a single shake in her voice. For a moment, I felt like I had stepped out of my own body and was watching a stranger collapse. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there, listening, my heart scraping against my ribs. The woman beside her asked something I couldn't hear, and my daughter shrugged like she was talking about a name on a list, not a man who had carried her on his shoulders. She said she was handling things on her own now, and the tone she used sounded like she had rehearsed it for months. The distance in her voice didn't sound like anger. It sounded like removal, as if I had already been erased. I pushed the door open without meaning to, and she saw me. She didn't flinch. She didn't look guilty or surprised. She just stared at me like a neighbor passing by on the street. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My throat locked, and my hands trembled around the grocery bag. I had thought maybe we were having a rough season. Maybe grief or stress had taken a toll. But the look she gave me was final. It was the expression someone gives when a decision has already been made. She walked away before I could find my voice. I stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of my age pressing into my bones. My legs were unsure. My breath came in tight waves. I wasn't a young man anymore, and moments like that stay in the body longer. I kept replaying her words, wondering how a child's voice could sound so sharp. People moved around me, but everything felt distant, like I was sinking in slow motion. When I finally reached the exit, something strange happened. A staff member stopped me and asked if my paperwork was ready. I didn't know what she meant. She said it had my signature on it, but she spoke as if I had already filled it out. I told her I hadn't signed anything. She gave me a confused look and apologized, saying she must have mixed up the names. But her reaction left a mark on me. It was small, but it felt wrong, like the first crack in a wall that had been standing for decades. Outside, the cold air tightened around my chest. I sat down on a bench, the wood hard against my back. My hands shook as I placed the groceries beside me. I kept thinking about what she had said and how certain she sounded. I wondered if the staff member's comment was connected, some thread I didn't understand yet. I thought about how aging makes everything feel heavier, how losing someone you love feels sharper when you don't have as many years left to repair anything. As buses passed and people hurried by, I tried to steady my breathing. I needed to understand what changed so much that my own daughter could erase me with one sentence. I needed to know why a stranger thought I had signed something I never touched, and I needed to figure out when my place in her life had shifted from father to nobody. Has anyone ever erased you from their life while you were still alive? I spent most of that evening sitting alone in my small living room, trying to understand how a bond built over decades could fall apart without warning. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see her adult face or hear the cold tone she used earlier that day. I saw her as a little girl running across the yard, calling my name with a joy that felt endless. Those early years stayed bright in my memory, even if she no longer carried them in hers. I raised her with steady hands, and everything I did because I believed she needed a father who showed up every single day. Her mother was the soft center of our home. She had a calm way of settling storms before they ever formed. When she laughed in the kitchen or hummed while folding clothes, it felt like our house breathed with her. Losing her changed everything. My daughter was 17 then, and the grief hit her like a sudden wave. She stopped talking to me the way she used to. She stopped joining me at the table. It was as if the silence that followed her mother's death wrapped around her and shut me out. I tried to reach her, but my own sorrow made my steps slow. I didn't know how to rebuild a world that no longer had the woman who held it together. After a while, the distance between us hardened. She grew into her 20s, and though she still lived under my roof for a time, she treated me more like a roommate than a parent. I assumed she just needed space. I told myself young adults needed room to figure out their lives. But every small change started adding up. She stopped answering my calls. She brushed off my questions. She pushed back when I tried to help. Little signs of entitlement crept in. Requests that felt heavier than they should have been. Demands masked as casual suggestions. When she asked me to help her with her first apartment deposit, I didn't hesitate. I worked overtime and went without new clothes that year just so she could move into a place she liked. I remember dropping off the check at her door and thinking I was doing what any caring father would do. She thanked me, but the warmth in her voice didn't stay. Soon after that, she needed help with her car insurance. Then it was her phone bill. Then some unexpected expenses she didn't want to explain. I convinced myself each time that she would find her balance soon. I wanted to believe she still valued our connection, but something in her tone suggested I had become a resource, not a person. Things changed even more when she met the man she later married. He never looked me in the eye when he shook my hand. His voice always carried a strange edge, like he was sizing me up. After he moved into her life, she seemed to drift even further from me. They made decisions without telling me. They spoke about money like it was a tool to measure love or loyalty. And slowly, it felt like they were building a life that no longer included me. I started noticing things that unsettled me. She avoided certain questions. She got defensive when I asked how she was doing. She brushed off my concerns as if they were annoyances instead of care. And more than once, she hinted that I should trust her judgment when it came to finances. Those moments sat heavy on me, but I tried to hold on. I wanted to believe we could find our way back to the closeness we once had. Now, after what happened at the hall, I see how those early signs were not small at all. They were warnings I didn't want to face. She forgot the years I held her when she cried, but I remember them. She forgot the nights I stayed awake during her fevers, but those moments still live inside me. She forgot the life we built together. But for me, those memories still shape who I am, and that is what makes her rejection feel so sharp. I didn't realize how slowly financial trouble can slip into a family until I felt it tightening around me. It didn't arrive with big alarms or sudden drama. It came in small moments that felt harmless at first. Moments I brushed aside because I believed a father should trust his child. I see now that those early signs were the ground softening beneath my feet. I kept stepping forward, thinking everything was stable, not knowing the earth was giving way with every act of trust I offered. One afternoon, she stopped by my house with a folder tucked under her arm. She said she needed help with simple paperwork, nothing that would take much time. She spoke with a practiced ease, as if she'd already smoothed out whatever concerns I might have. I asked what the forms were for, and she laughed under her breath, saying I didn't need to worry about details. She called them routine and said it was just for updated records. She placed a pen in my hand before I could ask another question. I remember looking at the lines on the page, trying to make sense of them, but my eyesight has gotten worse over the years. She pointed to the signature line and told me she needed it for a better rate on something she didn't explain. I hesitated. She noticed, and her tone shifted in a subtle way. She reminded me how much she had on her plate, how stressed she and her husband were, how they felt unsupported. She said signing the paper was the least I could do to show I understood her struggles. It wasn't loud guilt, not the kind that shouts. It was quiet, gentle pressure wrapped in disappointment. It made me feel like saying no would make me the unreasonable one. I signed because I thought that was what a caring father would do. I didn't want to add weight to her life when she already seemed overwhelmed. After that day, she started bringing more papers. Some she called authorizations, others confirmations. Each time she used the same soft push, reminding me of everything she handled alone. She made it sound like refusing would hurt her more than helping her ever could. I didn't want to believe she was using my trust against me, so I convinced myself these were normal things parents signed when their children stepped into adulthood. Still, a strange unease settled into me. It wasn't panic, just a feeling I couldn't shake, like something in the background had shifted. Her husband became more involved during this time. He stood beside her whenever she visited, quiet but present. He looked at me with eyes that felt too steady, as if he was waiting for me to falter or question something. He spoke little, but the silence between his words felt heavy. When I asked a simple question about a form once, he answered before she could. His voice was calm, but the way he explained things made me feel small, as if my confusion proved I wasn't capable of understanding anything important. It made me feel like aging was turning me into an inconvenience. There were moments when she slipped and spoke about future plans that didn't seem to include me. She mentioned decisions she was making on behalf of the family, and when I asked what she meant, she brushed it off. Her husband would remind her they needed to stay organized, and she would nod in a way that made me feel they'd been talking about things I wasn't supposed to hear. I started to wonder if the papers I signed were connected to those conversations. I didn't accuse them. I didn't demand explanations. I just carried the growing suspicion inside me, trying to balance my trust with the quiet warning rising in my chest. The distance between us wasn't emotional anymore. It felt planned, like something she was shaping piece by piece, one signature at a time. Tell me, would you sign something for your child without reading it fully? I didn't expect anything unusual the morning I walked into the bank. I only planned to update my address after moving into a smaller place. The line was short, and the air inside was cool and quiet, the kind of stillness that usually makes a person feel safe. When the teller called me forward, she spoke with a polite smile, but the words she used stopped me cold. "Sir," she said, not Mr. Bennett, which I could have understood, and certainly not anything connecting me to my daughter. Just, "Sir," like a stranger who had no family at all. I tried to ignore the sting, but something in her tone hinted that this wasn't only formal language. There was distance in it, like a wall had been built without my knowledge. I told her what I needed, and she typed on her computer for a moment. Then she paused. Her expression tightened just a little, almost the way someone looks when they realize there's a mistake they don't want to say out loud. She asked me to confirm my name. I repeated it, slow and clear. She checked the screen again and asked if I had brought official documentation, since the account holder's status had changed. I didn't understand what she meant, so I asked her to explain. She hesitated and said she would get a manager, and that was the first moment a quiet fear crept into my chest. The manager arrived with a printed file. He spoke formally, the same way the teller had. He said my daughter had updated her contact information with them and had listed me as estranged and not involved. Hearing those words spoken so casually felt like someone pulling the floor out from beneath me. I tried to correct him. I told him I was her father. I said we were not estranged, even if she had been distant. He didn't argue, but he looked at me with the careful expression people use around someone they think might be confused. He said the information came from a signed request. That word, signed, cut through me. I told him I hadn't signed anything related to her bank accounts. He showed me a copy of the form. My name was printed at the bottom beside a shaky version of my signature. It looked familiar, but wrong, like someone had traced it without understanding how my hand naturally curved the letters. When I pointed that out, he said the bank couldn't determine handwriting disputes and suggested I speak with my daughter directly. I thanked him because I didn't know what else to do. But inside, confusion was turning into something sharper. When I stepped outside, the sunlight felt too bright. I walked slowly, trying to think through everything that had happened. I remembered the papers she had brought me weeks earlier, the ones she called harmless. I remembered how quickly she'd pushed me to sign them. I remembered her husband standing nearby, quiet and watching. Each memory slid into place like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving. I didn't want to accuse her of anything, but I needed answers. I went home and pulled out the small drawer where I kept old paperwork. I spread out what I could find on the table. My eyesight made reading difficult, but I took my time. The more I looked, the more uneasy I became. Some dates didn't match. Some pages had my name misspelled. On one form, the signature line looked slightly different from the rest, as if someone had printed it separately and added it later. That was the moment I understood something wasn't an accident. Something was being shaped behind my back, and it carried my name in ways I didn't recognize. I wasn't ready to believe my daughter was capable of this, but I couldn't ignore what I had seen. I spent most of the night sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the papers I had gathered. My hands shook with every page I turned, but I kept going, driven by something deeper than confusion. The bank visit had shaken me, but what I found next changed everything. Near the bottom of the pile, folded between older receipts, was a document I didn't remember signing. At first, I thought it was another harmless form I must have forgotten, but when I opened it, a cold weight settled in my chest. The heading at the top said, "Voluntary Transfer of Authority." I didn't know what that meant, so I read the first few lines slowly. According to the paper, I had willingly given my daughter full control over my financial accounts, property decisions, and legal choices. It claimed I had agreed to step back from managing my own affairs because I no longer wished to be responsible for complex matters. I read that sentence twice. It didn't even sound like me. The language felt stiff and distant, as if it had been written by someone who didn't know me at all. Then I reached the signature line. My name sat there in ink, but it wasn't mine. The letters looked stretched, uneven, almost like a child had tried copying them from memory. My real signature had a steady curve at the start, something my hand learned over decades. This one didn't. My breath grew tight as I compared it to the signature on my driver's license. They didn't match, not even close. I felt horror rise inside me as I imagined someone sitting in a room, trying to imitate the way I wrote my own name. I took the paper to a small law office near my neighborhood the next morning. The attorney who met with me was a quiet man with gray hair and gentle eyes. He listened carefully as I explained what had happened. When I handed him the document, he adjusted his glasses and read it with slow, careful attention. After a moment, he asked if I had signed anything like it. I told him I hadn't. He didn't argue. Instead, he pointed to a section explaining that the transfer allowed my daughter to make decisions on my behalf without further consultation. He said that, if considered valid, it gave her almost complete control. I asked him how something like that could affect my life. His explanation felt like someone pulling thread after thread from the edge of a blanket until nothing was left. He said the document could allow her to move money, sell property, change account details, and act in my name. He said it could alter how institutions viewed my independence. He spoke calmly, but each word landed like a blow. My daughter had taken steps to remove me from my own decisions, not by mistake, by misunderstanding, by design. He asked if I wanted to challenge the document. I said yes, but I admitted I didn't know where to begin. He told me the first step was confirming whether the paper had been used anywhere. He mentioned the bank, real estate offices, and insurance company. When he said those things, I felt a wave of betrayal run through me. I thought about her visits, the pressure in her voice, the way her husband watched my reactions. Every moment that once felt confusing now felt deliberate. I asked him who would even benefit from something like this. He didn't hesitate. He said it would make things easier for someone looking to take over an elder's assets. Hearing that made something inside me break. I wasn't just being pushed aside emotionally. I was being erased legally. My own child had used my trust as a tool. When I walked out of the office, the sky looked darker than it had that morning. I knew what I had to do next. My steps were slow, but my mind was clear. I went straight to the police station. Have you ever trusted someone so much that you didn't protect yourself legally? When I walked into the police station with the forged document in my hand, I felt like I was carrying proof that a part of my life had been stolen. I spoke with an officer at the front desk who guided me to a small interview room. The walls were plain and the air felt still, but the officer who sat across from me listened with a calm focus that steadied me. I handed him the paperwork and he read it silently for a long moment. When he looked up, his expression had changed. He asked if I was certain I never signed anything like it. I told him I'd never seen it before. He nodded and said they would send it for analysis. 2 days later, I received a call asking me to come back. An investigator met me in a larger room with a computer and several folders spread out on the table. He told me the handwriting specialist confirmed what I already felt in my bones. The signature on the document wasn't mine. It didn't match my writing style or pressure points. Hearing those words made something settle inside me. It wasn't relief. It was validation mixed with anger I hadn't allowed myself to feel yet. The investigator then showed me records they had requested from my bank. He pointed to several large withdrawals I didn't recognize. He said the amounts had been moved using the authority granted by the forged document. He didn't make assumptions, but he didn't need to. The pattern was clear. Money had been shifting out of my accounts, not all at once, but slowly and consistently. He also showed me a change in the contact information attached to my file. My phone number had been replaced with hers. She had listed herself as the primary contact for safety reasons. Each page felt heavier than the last. The investigator explained that they had also reviewed her financial activity. He spoke in simple terms, as if he understood the weight of every word. He said she and her husband had made several payments toward a new property. Money from my accounts had been mixed into theirs. He didn't say the word theft, but it hung in the air between us. Then he showed me something that felt like a punch to the stomach. In a digital note attached to one of the forms, she had marked me as estranged. Another line said, I preferred she handled decision-making due to age-related decline. I had never said anything like that. Seeing those words typed out as if they were facts made my hands tremble. The investigator watched me carefully, giving me time to breathe. He said this kind of pattern, false estrangement, financial control, signature manipulation was common in elder exploitation cases. Hearing that phrase felt like being branded with something I never thought would apply to my life. They began the formal process then. They interviewed bank employees who processed the changes. They reviewed security footage from the day the forged document was submitted. They traced logins to her home computer. Each new detail added to the quiet storm building inside me. I never raised my voice. I never asked for pity. I just answered every question clearly because I wanted the truth laid out clean for everyone to see. When they spoke with her, they told me she avoided giving direct answers. She claimed misunderstandings. She blamed stress. She said I had agreed verbally, even if the signature wasn't perfect. I didn't attend the interview. I didn't want a confrontation. I only wanted the truth to stand on its own. Late on a Friday afternoon, the investigator called me back to the station. He handed me a printed notice. It stated that the police had gathered enough evidence to move forward. My daughter and her husband would be facing charges related to fraud, forgery, and exploitation of an elder. As I held the paper, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and strength. I had lost so much already, but at least now the truth had a voice. The arrest warrant was issued that evening. The courthouse hallway felt colder than the winter outside. I sat on a wooden bench, hands folded tightly, trying to steady the ache building in my chest. When the doors finally opened and the bailiff called us in, my legs felt heavier than they ever had. I walked to my seat and saw her at the defense table. She didn't look up. She didn't shift, didn't search the room, didn't even glance toward where I sat. Her eyes stayed locked on the table in front of her, and her face was stiff, guarded, almost hollow. I thought for a moment she might look at me by accident, but she didn't. She kept her head turned just enough to make sure our eyes never met. When the judge entered, everyone stood. I watched my daughter from the corner of my vision, hoping to see even a flicker of regret. Instead, she stood with the same tense posture, her jaw tight, her shoulders squared, as if she believed she was the one being wronged. Her husband sat beside her, whispering something under his breath. She nodded slightly, but her expression didn't soften. Seeing her like that felt like losing her for a second time. The prosecutor began by laying out the timeline. He explained how the forged document had been submitted, how my accounts had been altered, and how the withdrawals lined up with her purchases. His voice was steady, but every detail felt like a fresh cut. When he described the document giving her full authority, he called it what it was, an act of elder exploitation. Hearing that word used in a courtroom, attached to my name, made my stomach twist. No parent ever wants their child linked to something so cruel. When the prosecutor displayed the signature on a screen, the difference was undeniable. Even from a distance, I could see how wrong it looked. He explained the analysis done by the handwriting expert. He showed how the strokes didn't match, how the pressure was uneven, how the letters didn't follow the natural style of my writing. Each point built the case, piece by piece, like a picture forming slowly, but clearly. My daughter sat still. She didn't shake her head or whisper a protest. She didn't even blink. Then the defense stood. The attorney tried to frame everything as a misunderstanding. He said I was aging. He said memory can be unreliable. He suggested maybe I had agreed verbally. He tried to paint my daughter as overwhelmed, stressed, and simply trying to protect the family's future. His words felt thin, stretched, like they had no ground to stand on. When he implied that maybe I forgot signing the papers, something inside me hardened. I didn't speak, but I felt heat rise in my chest. Forgetting is not the same as handing your life away. The judge listened carefully, asking pointed questions the defense couldn't answer. When the prosecutor presented the digital trail, logins from her home, timestamps matching her schedule, messages between her and her husband planning transfers, the defense grew quieter. By the time both sides finished, the truth stood plainly in the center of that room. There was no confusion. There was no misunderstanding. There was choice, intent, action. The judge's voice carried a weight I will never forget. She said the betrayal was profound. She said exploiting a parent for financial gain was a violation of trust that cut deeper than any typical fraud. She condemned the way my daughter had isolated me, erased me, and spoken for me without my knowledge. Every word felt like both justice and heartbreak. When the sentence was delivered, 18 months in jail, restitution, and probation, my daughter still didn't look at me. Not once. She kept her eyes forward, as if I didn't exist at all. I felt relief spread slowly through me, but grief followed right behind it. Justice had come, but the cost was a part of my heart I would never get back. Do you think the sentence was enough? After the sentencing, life didn't return to what it was before. It couldn't. Something in me had shifted, not in a dramatic way, but in a slow, quiet settling. For weeks, I found myself sitting by the window in the evenings, hands folded, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't hoping for a call or a letter. I was learning how to breathe again without the weight of her choices pressing against my chest. When you reach my age, you learn that some wounds don't close. They simply stop bleeding long enough for you to walk without stumbling. I thought a lot about fatherhood during those evenings. I thought about the years spent working overtime so she could have what she needed. The birthdays I never missed. The late nights spent calming her fears when storms rattled the windows. Those memories didn't disappear just because she tried to wipe me from her life. They still belonged to me. They carried proof of who I was long before a forged document tried to claim otherwise. For the first time in months, I realized she couldn't steal that part of me. My name meant more than ink on a page. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle or the lies written in those forms. The hardest part was understanding that she had made a deliberate choice. She didn't drift away from me. She walked, she planned, she erased me in places where a parent should never be erased. Accepting that truth took time, and even now it sits heavy in my chest, but the weight no longer crushes me. It simply reminds me of what I survived. Justice came, but justice isn't healing. It's clarity, and clarity can hurt in a cleaner, sharper way than betrayal. When the judge condemned her actions, I felt something release inside me, like I had been holding my breath for far too long. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel victory. I felt the truth settle into place, solid and immovable. I needed that truth more than I ever realized. Without it, I might have spent the rest of my life doubting my own memory, my own worth, my own place in the world. There are moments when the house feels too quiet. In those moments, I remind myself that loneliness is not failure. It is simply the space left behind after removing something that was hurting me. I have found a strange kind of peace in that silence. It allows me to remember who I am without the shadow of her intentions hanging over me. Age takes many things from us: strength, speed, certainty. But it also gives us perspective. It teaches us that dignity is something you carry within, not something others give or take away. She tried to remove my name from legal documents, but she couldn't erase what I lived, or the years I spent raising her, or the man I chose to be. My legacy was never in the accounts she touched or the papers she forged. My legacy is in the life I built with honesty, with effort, with steady hands that did the best they could. And no one, not even your own child, can rewrite that truth. I don't know what the future holds for her. I don't know if she will ever understand the pain she caused, or if she will continue believing her own excuses. But I do know this: I won't chase her. I won't wait for a reconciliation that would only reopen wounds I've learned to protect. Justice was necessary, even if it came at the cost of the little hope I had left for her. Now I ask myself the same question I leave with you. Should I forgive her? Someday, or are some betrayals too deep to heal?